Happy Wednesday, guys, and welcome to day 26 of remote learning in civics. Today, we're just going to review our work from the previous 2 days. On Monday, you had a Pictionary assignment for the judicial branch, and then yesterday, on Tuesday, you were creating a checks and balances chart in your notes. So the directions for the Pictionary said to explain the following pictures and how they relate or how they connect to the judicial branch. I wanted you to identify some key vocabulary terms that are associated with the picture and then explain a little bit about that topic. So make sure you guys are reading the directions very carefully. Some of you guys just wrote down a vocabulary term but didn't explain how it connects to the judicial branch or explain what the vocabulary term means. Some of you guys put down vocabulary terms that have nothing to do with the judicial branch, and then you didn't explain how it connects to the judicial branch. So just make sure that you guys are following the directions carefully. So number one over here, we see the Constitution. We know it's the Constitution because it starts with those very famous first 3 words of the preamble, "We the people." But it's not enough just to say that this is the Constitution. Again, I want you to explain the connection to the judicial branch. So you should have been able to explain that in Article 3 of the Constitution, the judicial branch is outlined. So you should have mentioned something about Article 3 for number 1. Let me just say before I move on that you may have different answers than what I'm giving you right now. That's because you could have interpreted these pictures many different ways. So there really is no right or wrong answer as long as you connected it to the judicial branch. Explain how that picture relates to the courts. There are many different answers to some of these pictures. I'm just going to give you the answers that I was going for when I put these pictures. So number 2, obviously, is a courtroom. And it's obviously connected to the judicial branch because the judicial branch is all about the court system. Number 3 over here, we have a group of judges. So if you put judges, that'd be okay. But if you count up how many judges there are, you see there are a total of 9 judges. And then you should know that the Supreme Court has 9 justices or judges on the court. So number 3, I was going for the Supreme Court. Number 4, we see the president shaking hands with somebody. Now, this one may have been a little bit difficult for you to understand what I'm going for. But again, if you looked in your Article 3 notes for the judicial branch, then you may have come across the note about justices being appointed by the president and then serving for their entire life. So that's what I was going for in this picture. This is President Trump shaking hands with Brett Kavanaugh, his second appointed Supreme Court justice. So it's a pretty big deal for a president to appoint or select somebody to be on the Supreme Court because, as I just said, they serve for their entire life or until they resign. So appointing somebody to the Supreme Court can have a impact for the next 20 or 30 years. So number 5, I thought was the hardest picture to understand what's going on here. And it's kind of the second part to number 4. So number 4, we talked about the president appointing a Supreme Court justice. Number 5, before that person is officially on the Supreme Court, they need to be approved by the Senate. So that's what we have here. Is somebody sitting at this middle table. Kind of looks pretty intimidating, right? You have a whole circle of people around you. This would be the Judiciary Committee of the Senate, and these senators are going to interview this nominee or appointee and ask them questions about their experience, give them some hypothetical questions about what they would do on the court. Basically, it's a job interview. They're getting interviewed to see if the Senate is going to confirm or approve their appointment. So number 5, the answer could be a Senate confirmation hearing. It could be the Senate approving or confirming an appointment for the Supreme Court. That's what I was going for. Probably not what you got, but hopefully that makes sense now. Number 6 should have been pretty easy. I gave you this picture when we talked about Marbury versus Madison. So you could have given me that answer, Marbury v. Madison. But really what the picture is illustrating is judicial review, which was created through the landmark case Marbury v. Madison. So we see the Supreme Court illustrated by a judge here, looking down on the other 2 branches of government. Down here it says Capitol, Congress, or the legislative branch, meets in the U.S. Capitol building. And then down here it says White House. We know the president, the leader of the executive branch, works out of the White House. So we have the judicial branch looking over the other 2 branches and making sure that what they're doing, the laws they're creating and the actions they're taking are constitutional, making sure that those laws and actions are legal and they're okay. If not, the Supreme Court could use judicial review to strike down a law made by Congress or to stop an action by the president. Moving on to number 7 here, we see an award that says first. So you'd have to go back into your Article 3 notes and scan for something that means first, and you should have come across original jurisdiction. Original means first or beginning. Jurisdiction means the power to hear a court case. So original jurisdiction is the power of a court to be the first court to hear a case. Now, most court cases are going to start at very low levels of courts. We haven't talked about all the levels yet. All we've read is Article 3, and the only court established by Article 3 is the Supreme Court way at the top. And in very rare cases, the Supreme Court has original jurisdiction or has the power to hear the court case for the very first time. Those are rare cases being when a state is involved or when an ambassador, minister, or consul is involved. Number 8 is the other type of jurisdiction we talked about, appellate jurisdiction. Another perfectly acceptable answer for number 8 would be appeal. An appeal is when you lose a court case and you make a request to the next level of court, the next highest court, to review your case. So in the picture, you see a pyramid with different levels. So it's supposed to represent the different levels of courts, and then an arrow pointing up, meaning that you're requesting a higher court to review your case. A court at a higher level has appellate jurisdiction because they're able to review those court cases that are being appealed up from a lower case. So appeal or appellate jurisdiction works for number 8. Number 9, we have an arrow pointing to this group of people. If you counted how many seats there are, I believe there are 12 seats in that little box area. This is a jury. A jury is a randomly selected group of citizens interviewed by the lawyers and hand-selected, again, from a very random group of citizens. A jury will sit and listen to the evidence in a court case and decide if someone is innocent or guilty, or decide if somebody did any wrongdoing in a civil case. Number 10, it's really vague, and you could have done a number of different things for this one. But what I was going for is kind of these two guys having an argument or a dispute. And one of our vocabulary terms on the Article 3 worksheet was controversy. So controversy or dispute or argument is kind of what I was going for. That's what a judge in a courtroom is for, to solve those disputes and those disagreements. But you could have talked about the judge, you could have talked about the plaintiff or defendant, two different sides in a civil case, arguing over property, arguing over somebody doing something wrong to the other person. A lot of different answers for number 10. All right, let's move on to yesterday's work, Tuesday's work, the checks and balances chart. So I wanted you to copy this entire chart into your notebook and then fill in the blanks. Again, please make sure you're following my directions. I ask you to create this in your notes section. I want this in your notes section. You don't want it on a separate piece of paper that's going to get lost. I want all of our notes in one organized place. So checks and balances, we've already learned this. When we talked about Montesquieu, one of the Enlightenment thinkers we learned about before reading the Constitution. Checks and balances is the system that allows each branch of government to look over or check over the other branches and limit the power of the other branches if they think they're doing something wrong. So it allows one branch to intervene with other branches, put a stop to what other branches are doing. It's kind of like a constant game of tug of war for power. Each branch of government is hopping in, jumping in, and checking on each other and stopping others from doing things. And really it helps to create balance in our government, to protect any branch of government from becoming too powerful. So I told you in the directions that this chart is meant to be read from left to right as a sentence, kind of using the headings to guide your sentence. So for example, the first row here would read, the legislative and executive branch has the power to blank, but the judicial branch, specifically the Supreme Court, can limit that power because it can blank. So I helped you out on rows 1 and 2 to get you started because they're a little difficult. It's a little tricky to figure out how to fill in this chart. So I gave you the powers here in the first blanks, and then you had to figure out the checks or the limits on those powers. So let's start off with row 1. I had told you to put in this first blank space that the legislative branch creates laws and that the executive branch can carry out actions. So this sentence would read, the legislative and executive branch have the power to create laws and carry out actions, but the judicial branch, the Supreme Court, can limit those powers because and you had to fill in the blank. Hopefully you talked about judicial review. The Supreme Court, the judicial branch, can limit the other two branches of the laws they create and the actions they take using judicial review. Judicial review allows the court to strike down laws and to stop presidential actions if the Supreme Court thinks those laws and actions are unconstitutional. They go against the Constitution. The second row here, I had told you to fill in this first blank with hold public office or to have a government job. So your sentence reads, the executive, legislative, and judicial branches have the power to hold public office or have a government job, but the legislative branch, Congress, can check that power because, and now since we're talking about the legislative branch, you have to go back to Article 1 in your notes, and hopefully you came across impeachment. Congress can impeach public officials. So anybody in government in any of the three branches, even if they get elected to their position or appointed to their position, they do something that is wrong, immoral, unethical, illegal, then Congress can impeach that person, bring formal charges against them, and try to remove them from office. On the third row, this is where you're on your own at this point, after I had helped you with the first two rows. So third row reads, the legislative branch, Congress, has the power to make laws, but the executive branch, the president, can limit Congress's power because he or she can veto those laws, reject those bills, and not allow them to become laws. So Congress can make bills or laws, but the president can veto or reject those bills. The fourth line down here is just an extension of that third line. The executive branch, the president, has the power to veto bills or veto laws, But Congress can limit that power because it can override the president's veto. You may recall that Congress can make the bill a law themselves if they have 2/3 support in both the House of Representatives and 2/3 support in the Senate. So the president can veto laws or bills, but Congress can override the president's veto with a 2/3 vote in each house. The last one down here, a little difficult perhaps, because I specifically wanted you to have talked about something the Senate can do to check the power of the president. And there's actually two things that go in this first blank. So if you got both things, that's awesome, nice job. Most of you probably just put one, which is fine. Just make sure you copy down the other one right now. So the president has the power to make treaties with other nations, and has the power to nominate or appoint people to top government jobs. But the Senate can limit that power because the Senate can take a vote to reject those treaties and can take a vote to reject those nominations and appointments. The president's treaties and appointments and nominations need to be approved by the Senate. So the Senate can not confirm those appointments and can also reject those treaties. So I hope that clears up that chart, and hopefully you guys can make sense of all those pictures from Pictionary now. But if you have any further questions, please feel free to message me on Edmodo, or as always, stop by my Zoom office hours. Till I see you again, stay safe.